My name is Willy Bolander. I study influence, persuasion, and leadership in selling and sales management, and I teach people how to sell. In this podcast, we'll talk to some of the world's top sales leaders and see what we can learn from them. Welcome to the Sales Lab. Every year in November, Florida State University hosts a massive event in Orlando, Florida. For business students, this is a sales role play and case competition, an opportunity to compete and get exposed to job opportunities with some of the world's best sales organizations. For companies, this is an unbelievable recruitment opportunity, bringing several hundred of the nation's best students, all already interested in starting their careers in sales, into one location for you to meet. So if you're a student looking to differentiate yourself and secure your dream job in sales, a marketing or sales professor looking to show off your students and connect them with great opportunities, or a sales manager or recruiter looking to acquire top sales talent, come learn more about the International Collegiate Sales Competition at www.icsc-fsu.com. That's www.icsc-fsu.com. All right, we are on to the final part of this interview with Scott Miller, the EVP from Franklin Covey. Talk about a lot of subjects in this episode as well. I think I'm going to call it Plant Before You Harvest. But there are some other contenders for good names. I thought maybe emergent versus deliberate strategy. Are you mature enough to change your mind? Delivering on your commitments? But I think Plant Before You Harvest is maybe the best title, although we cover all these subjects in this discussion. Hope you get a lot out of it. Thanks for tuning in. You mentioned a couple of things that, since you mentioned them, I feel empowered to bring them up. There's a lot going on in the world right now. We see social movement leaders or bad leaders, leaders in a good sense, or people trying to be leaders and maybe they're not doing it. We see this in politics. We see this in social movements. We see this in companies. We see this all over we're just surrounded by, almost ironically, a vacuum of leadership, seeing areas where real leaders are needed and then seeing real leaders in action. And then it must be, it's frustrating to me sometimes looking at some of these people and the things they do and realizing, okay, they're clearly not thinking with the end in mind, right? They're really just trying to get through the day and get on with it, Or even thinking first to understand, then to be understood. Well, gosh, who does that? and if you think about just this year, everybody who's been on the news positioning themselves in a leadership role, I don't know. There's an awful lot of people in leadership roles not doing these things that seem so fundamental and basic.
It's horrifying. I think it starts at the top. I think that effective leaders are more concerned with what is right than being right. When that's your core, when your core is to deeply check your ego, check your agenda, declare your intent, do your best to study the facts, and then combine your own experience with what you think is the right thing to do for the largest number of people. That's really when you start to be, I think, an effective principled leader, that you understand there are principles that govern all of our behavior, right? Live by the sword, die by the sword. And I don't want to say that we're depressed, but I'm just reflective on the vitriol, name calling, and the lack of respect. It's grotesque. It's repugnant. The only word is repugnant. And what we're not seeing right now is leadership. We're seeing self-serving divisiveness. We're seeing petty backstabbing tactics. It's repugnant. It's not leadership. It's predatory relationship practices to advance your own agenda, your own fame, your own ego, and quite frankly, your own legacy. We see it across both parties and lots of organizations, and there are great pockets of leadership, both in organizations and in public service. And that will come again. This too shall pass. The problem is when you have leadership that is more concerned about being right than doing right, you have what is generational division happening in homes, at Thanksgiving, at Christmas. You have vitriolic politics happening that are pitting family members against each other that can't actually gather because they're not able now to have civilized conversation because vitriol has now been normalized and prejudice has been normalized. We're in a really difficult place in our country right now. So I would ask all of your listeners, when you post, are you adding value? When you speak, are you lifting others up? When you promote, are you providing a platform for others who do not have the same voice that you have? It's a high standard. Do you keep your word? Do you speak about other people kindly? Because to quote Dr. Covey, you build trust with those who are present when you are loyal to those who are absent. There's never a condition when a leader should be disparaging someone else. What happened? I know what happened. Why did it happen that your opponent became your enemy? We hear this so often, but it's a false narrative. I would ask everyone, speak charitably about those who you disagree with. Don't be naive. You'll fall for some agenda. You'll fall for any agenda. So, be true to your principles, but decent leaders can disagree and still go have a beer.
Yeah.
And that ought to be your criteria. You ought to be speaking about people and sharing your opinions in a way that allows you to go have a cup of coffee an hour later, including if one of you won and one of you lost. Because sometimes there are winners and there are losers. And I feel like we have lost that ability at so many levels of leadership, and we'll get it back. But I'll tell you, I'm a Caucasian man in my 50s. I'm a lifelong Republican. I'm a capitalist. I'm a Catholic. I'm a father of 3 boys. I'm a husband. I'm a son-in-law. I'm a brother. I'm a neighbor, a church member. I'm a taxpayer. And what I'm seeing going on right now is not what's going to make America once again the greatest country in the world. We've got to find a way to speak respectful, listen to other points of view, not compromise our principles, but do it all in a way that we can still be friends tomorrow, including inside of our households.
Well, and you can challenge ideas, and you can even challenge them assertively or firmly without venturing into belligerence, right? I mean, a simple question can get the job done much more effectively than a statement, almost like sales 101, right? I mean, I could come in here and tell you you're wrong, or I could just ask you to justify your position, or, where did you read that? Or, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. And, if they discover something, if they discover that they're being lied to on their own, obviously that's going to be infinitely more powerful than, you just storming up to them and putting your finger in their face and making statements, right? But for some reason, we learn all these sales principles, and then sometimes they're easy to forget when you're not, in a specific sales interaction. You think, well, this is different. Well, no, it's all influence and persuasion. It's all the same material at the end of the day. You can use those tactfully to get other persuasive tasks accomplished.
So nicely said. I think, as I have been in business for 30 years now and starting to write more and have a little bit higher of a platform, I think one of my favorite quotes I've ever heard, Willy, is this idea that people that say they have 30 years of experience, what they usually have is 1 year repeated 29 times.
Oh, yeah.
And I am constantly trying every day to challenge my own mindset. Why do I believe that? Who taught me that? Where did I hear that? Am I confusing my emotions, my opinions with facts? Is that true? Did that happen? And as I become a more sophisticated speaker and leader, I'm challenging everything I believe to be true. Doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just, is that still true? Should that still be true? Is that the way it should be in the future? I've operated this way for the last X number of years, but should this change? Let me tell you, one of the most profound things I've ever read is I'm good friends with Clayton Christensen, who passed this past year. He, of course, was one of the most profound, renowned, innovative thinkers in the world. And he co-wrote a book with Karen Dillon, also a friend who's the former editor of the Harvard Business Review. They wrote a book called How Will You Measure Your Life? I think it's one of the best books written in my lifetime. How will you measure your life? And they took this concept of all these business principles and they applied them to people's personal life. The book again is called How Will You Measure Your Life? And in the book, they share some research done by another third party that said, in essence, Willy, that when companies that were measured by their financial performance, those companies that, quote, achieved financial success, end quote, they did it 93% of the time with what they call an emergent strategy versus a deliberate strategy. Emergent versus deliberate, meaning the successful companies did it with a different strategy than they set out with. It often wasn't the CEO or the founder or the entrepreneur's original idea. That they
had to pivot. They had to adapt.
They were humble enough. They were vulnerable enough. They were collaborative enough to realize, well, this ain't working. What else you got? And it might have come from someone else in the organization, the receptionist, the frontline salesperson, a franchisee owner, a new investor. But their ego was such that they were able to check it and say, how do we pivot, to quote you? 93% of the time, the company achieved financial success with a different strategy than the one they set out with, or perhaps it was the fifth one. Who knows? Right now, you can take it too far and you can just bounce around ideas to where nothing gets traction. I'm not suggesting that, but I think the comes to your own mindset as well? Are you mature enough to change your mind? Because I think mature, effective leaders need to sometimes change their mind. I don't know if that means you move from pro-life to pro-choice. I'm not suggesting that. For some people that happens, but I think there's some wisdom in there as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, that sort of highlights the sort of balancing act of leadership where, like I was mentioning before, we sometimes get so dedicated to making these schizophrenic changes, just change something. And that looks like you're adapting, and then that'll keep your boss happy. And yeah, there is a balance, right? Okay, yes, sometimes you have to pivot, but don't pivot every day. Don't if you're pivoting constantly, you're just spinning around in circles, right? I'm kind of keeping an eye on the clock here and realizing we're getting close to you have a hard stop at the end of the hour. So let me just ask you about your trajectory. I mean, how does somebody go from not being an EVP at the Franklin Covey company to finding themselves in that role?
Oh, deliver on your commitments. I think if someone were to ask me, well, you just did. So I'll answer that like I just did. I always did the job I was in. I aspired to bigger jobs. I dressed for bigger jobs. I hobnob with more senior people. I always friended up. And some people misquote me on this. I always have friended up. People that are smarter than me, more experienced, wealthier, more educated, more cultured, more traveled, more diverse. I've always friended up, but I've always crushed the job I was in. So if I was a salesperson, I made sure I delivered on my revenue goal for all 16 quarters in a row. If I was a sales vice president, I delivered on all of my quarters, top line, bottom line, 16 quarters in a row. So how I have earned my promotions in life was by doing the job I had, but by making it clear that I wanted other jobs. I think too often our younger generation, I hope no one's offended by this, I think they violate what is called the law of the harvest. This is a principle, right? Potato farmers know what it takes to grow potatoes, and you cannot circumvent Mother Nature. And every 3 or so years, a potato farmer doesn't plant potato. They plant alfalfa or some other money-losing crop because they've stripped the soil of all the nutrients and they've got to replenish the soil with new nutrients. And so that next year they can grow bigger, better potatoes. And I think in people's careers, I think in maybe the newer generation, sometimes people are harvesting too soon. You got to plant, fertilize, rake, weed, plant some more, water some more, fertilize some more. Heck, the average tenure in a company now is 3 years. I don't think it's about disloyalty. People are hungry to learn and to contribute and to make a difference. And so to answer your question, I always delivered on the job that I had. And as a consequence, I was given more responsibility, bigger titles, more divisions to run, better pay, because I had a track record of doing the job I had, while making it very clear I wanted more. I think too often people make it really clear they want to do more, and they do other jobs or get distracted. But at the end of the day, they didn't deliver on the tasks they had at hand. Sometimes your job isn't to innovate or be creative. Sometimes your job is just to do the job you were given, execute it like the boss wants you to do. Sometimes the boss wants you to improve it or change it. I think there's great, again, wisdom to know kind of when to innovate and when to just execute. And I think I've found a sweet spot in my career of knowing when my boss just wanted me to deliver on her strategy and when the boss wanted my opinion. And I've kind of calibrated those wisely throughout my career.
Interesting. And so where did you actually start? You came out of school. Where did you go to school? Where did you start?
Yes, I'm actually from Florida. I live in Utah now. I went to Rollins College, got a liberal arts degree at Rollins College, worked for the Disney company for 4 years. They fired me because I was an immature jackass in my 20s. And here I was, this young, single, Catholic, unemployed boy in Orlando. And the Covey company picks me up, and here I moved to Utah. It's kind of like being Jewish and moving to Vatican City, right? Not a cultural genius move, but I managed to make it work well. And so I had a liberal arts degree, always had a bit of a passion for sales and marketing, kind of moved out to Utah and took a sales job. Here I am, 25 years later. I've had 9 separate careers inside of one company. It's quite highly unusual now outside of the military, the post office. And it's been great for me. I've had lots of opportunities to leave. I've chosen to stay because of the culture, the brand, how I was treated, my income. I will at some point, probably here in the near future, break off from Franklin Covey. I'll always be a consultant and advisor, but as my platform and brand grows, I've got some great things that are coming my way because people have believed in me and I try to do what I say. And so I'm really the function, I'm the outcome of people who always believed in me more than I believed in myself. And I hopefully never took that for granted. And when someone put their reputation out on the line for me, I never took that for granted. And I tried my best to make them proud, made lots of mistakes. Oh my gosh. I have my human resource file is a expandable folder, right? Said the wrong thing, did the wrong thing, behaved the wrong way. Nothing illegal or moral, but I learned along the way through great leadership. And I am the product of people who took me under their wing. And like I said, lent me their reputation until I earned it on my own.
That's a good way to say it, actually. And then at the beginning of this call, you mentioned maybe having some stories of the greatest sales victory or maybe the most embarrassing sales defeat. Anything you can share with us on that front? I'm always trying to coax these stories out of guests, and some of them don't seem eager to embarrass themselves for some reason.
Well, I wrote a book called Management Mess to Leadership Success, where I share 30 horrifying messes throughout my career. So for me, it's quite easy to confess my messes. I told you, I'm Catholic. In fact, I didn't even know we were on the air when I was mentioning that earlier about my sales messes. Let me tell you the biggest learning that I took from my sales career. This is a good life lesson. That was when to differentiate between bad news and wrong news. I think a lot of salespeople have what one of my sales leaders called happy ears. They think they're getting buying signals. They think a deal is going to close, and then they realize there was no deal. They weren't talking to the right person. They didn't understand the decision-making criteria. They didn't understand who had to sign off on the deal. They didn't understand the client's goals, the client's sales goals. They were so focused on their quarterly goal, they had no idea what the client's goal was. They were so focused on pushing their solution, they didn't take time to be a trusted advisor and say, to the client, my solution is the wrong solution. Actually, the better solution is my competitor's solution. And forgo a sale now to get a sale later. Because then the client sees you as a trusted advisor and you have their best interest at heart. These are tough lessons to earn when you are a new salesperson and you're going to get fired because you missed your quarters, 2 quarters in a row. Hopefully you're working for a company that provides you with some elasticity where you can mature into becoming a trusted advisor. This idea of knowing bad news from wrong news is very important. Wrong news means you're just making it up. You really do not know the facts. Bad news happens all day long. And as an employee, as a salesperson, you should deserve to work for a sales leader who can handle bad news. Because as a leader, your job is to handle bad news all day long. I do not accept wrong news. Wrong news proves to me you're making it up, you're phoning it in, you're BSing me. Bad news means, things went south. But the more you ask questions, the more you move outside your comfort zone, the more you ask the client. So is this really a problem you can afford to solve? Is there budget allocated to this? What is your decision-making criteria? What is your timeline? What are the names of the people who need to approve this deal? When will purchasing get involved? Who else are you considering to provide a solution? Could I have those names? Is this really something you are going to hire for? Or have you already made up your mind and you're going with a competition and you're just having me validate that, right? Ask these questions in diplomatic, courageous, considerate ways. The more you earn the right to ask these questions with clients, the more they'll tell you the truth and the less you'll be caught off guard. I think the big idea there is don't be naive. Because when you may walk out thinking you have a sale, you may have walked out just validating their sale to somebody else. So ask those questions in very delicate ways. Most people will tell you what you need to know if you ask. And I think most salespeople early on in their career, I've probably used the word most a lot today, but I think it's probably true, is you're embarrassed. You don't feel you have the street cred. You don't feel you have a reputation. You're not comfortable asking the questions. Ask the tough questions. Say, hey, can I ask you a couple of tough questions? Most people will answer them. Do you really have budget for this? What is your budget? Am I going to win on quality? Am I going to win on price? Am I going to win on service? What's important to you? I'll send you off with this. This idea of the golden rule is treat others how we want to be treated. It's totally eclipsed by the platinum rule. Treat others how they want to be treated. Ask the client, what is a win for you? How can I earn your business? What does a successful solution, implementation, relationship look like? Move off your own agenda, your own timeline, your own sales quota, your own sales goal. If you can't tell your leader what is your client sales goal, then you're not serving your client. You want to know their sales goals, their revenue goals, as intimately as you know your own. The top salespeople in the world check their solution, they check all their pitches, and they just listen to what the client wants to accomplish. And then usually the funding and the budget find their way there, even if they're not there in the beginning.
That's great. And I'll just add, there's something even aside from the value of getting the answers to those questions, there's some value simply in asking them, right? Because the customer is innately paying attention, right? I mean, they're able to discern when you ask a question that nobody else asked, when you get them to talk at a level that the other people didn't get them to talk, right?
Yeah.
So that, aside from the insights you gather, just that act itself is quite powerful.
Can I share my biggest sales mess real quick?
Oh, please.
So I'm going to come back to Dr. Covey's book. He wrote the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's often misquoted in the press as The 7 Habits of Highly Efficient People. He did not write the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Efficient People. There's a difference between having an effectiveness mindset and having an efficient mindset. One's not better than the other. They're just different. I'm a very efficient person. I'm very productive. I like to get things done. I get up at 4 a.m. I write my Inc. column. Then from 4 to 5, I move over to my books. I then become a dad. I then become an officer. I get a lot done, and it's actually served me very well in life. The problem is I take that efficiency mindset and I move it over into my relationships. And as a salesperson, sales is all about relationships, building high trust, mutually beneficial relationships. So as a salesperson, I was always rushing the sale, rushing the relationship, looking at my watch, that sort of natural anxiety in me and the desire to move things along, which in some areas of my life has made me very successful. I get a lot done. I get more done on Saturday morning by 9 o'clock than most people get done all day. But in my relationships, I kept moving that efficiency mindset when it should have been an effectiveness mindset. The many profound things Dr. Covey said, he said, with people, fast is slow and slow is fast. So my sales messages were always when I was trying to move the agenda, move the sale on my time frame, my quota, my quarter, which was, sometimes you have to do that, especially when your job's in the line, right? Or your commission is going to suffer. I get it. I don't need to be Pollyanna. But I think my biggest insight to your audience today is know when to be efficient and know when to be effective. And almost every time when it involves relationships, you need to slow down and be effective, especially in sales.
No, I like that a lot. I mean, it's very easy for people, maybe especially young people, to look at a task and say, well, I've put in 40 hours this week, so I must have done my job. But if your job is connected to an outcome, closing a sale or generating a certain level of revenue or whatever, well, who cares how many hours you worked? That's not what's being evaluated, right? Maybe you would have been better to work 30 hours and actually get the job done. Or maybe you needed to spend that extra 10, 20, who knows, right, to work very hard. But this is actually very in line. This discussion is very much in line with several of the other interviews that I've done recently that are talking about earning your work-life balance, right? Striving and struggling and always doing your job and delivering on the commitments you've made, and then trying to do more. And this idea of, if you're planning on having half the afternoon Friday and then all day Saturday and all day Sunday just to lounge around, that's going to cause you some problems. You're not going to be able to get that job done in those parameters. But you can beat your head against the wall, rough yourself up a little bit to try to get the job done the right way on the front end so that you can sort of earn your way. I mean, reaping and harvesting, exactly what you said earlier, right? Well, I know you've got to go, but I definitely appreciate your time. Great conversation.
Thanks for the platform. I appreciate it. Hope you have a great weekend. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about some of the things that I've learned in the hopes that some of your listeners can shortcut their own messes and learn a lot of mine. Thanks for the time.
That's it for this interview. I hope you got something valuable out of it. Of course, if you did, be sure to subscribe and rate this podcast on whatever app you use to listen. Also, share this with your colleagues and friends, and let's continue to have a deeper discussion on all things related to selling and sales leadership. See you next time in the Sales Lab.